In this day and age, it is very difficult to take a very nuanced position because of polarization. But we are going to look at one of the international comedians making a commentary piece on the Prime Minister of India and objectively dissect the piece. Now, from the start, I will admit of having no dog in the fight of how our Prime Minister is portrayed. I certainly have my disappointments with the Prime Minister, and for those who think that this is a piece to somehow defend the Narendra Modi as a buck, then I'm sorry to disappoint. Let's begin.
Our main story tonight concerns India. It just narrowly beats out America as the country where a 20-minute lecture in this accent is the least welcome. India is currently preparing for a very important visitor who is arriving tomorrow.
Donald Trump's first visit to India will be a special one. He will be accompanied by the First Lady, Melania Trump. Many are wondering if they will make an unscheduled visit to the Taj Mahal, the enduring symbol of love.
Yeah, why wouldn't they do that? Perfection. Just listen to him talk about Modi when they met up last September.
He's a great gentleman and a great leader. And I remember India before. Now, not intimately, but I remember India before, and it was very torn. There was a lot of dissension, a lot of fighting, and he brought it all together. Like a father would bring it together. And maybe he's the father of India. We'll call him the father of India. I think that's not so bad.
Yeah, that's not so bad, is it? You know what a father is, right? But calling Modi the father of India is completely inappropriate for multiple reasons, not the least of which is that there is a certain Gandhi who already holds that exact fucking title. Which is not to say that Modi is not popular.
Now, Donald Trump is clearly an idiot. I have never heard this. I have never heard anyone call Narendra Modi the father of the nation. If he is so popular, then he wouldn't be losing state elections in India. This is nonsense. Clearly, Donald Trump has a lot wrong with him. So you could say I agree with John Oliver.
Modi is not popular. He is. He was recently overwhelmingly re-elected for a second five-year term. And Modi's cult of personality extends well beyond India. You may be aware of him as one of the most aggressive huggers on the world stage, or from his charming appearance on Man vs. Wild with Bear Grylls.
Here we go. If you
this
wondered if there's elephant, there is definitely elephant.
Elephant. Yeah.
Have a smell.
Yeah.
That's good, honest.
It's a now fertilizer.
And when it is really fresh and it's really wet, straight out of the anus, once in Africa, I squeezed it like this. And all the juice because it was almost sterile, but not today.
OK. I know that seems gross, but remember, that dung is straight out of the anus.
This goes without saying, but this is why I hate our dear Prime Minister. This is stupid. This is stupid PR that he often engages in. He doesn't need to go on Man vs. Wild. He needs to do his job, clearly. And this is part of the piece of what makes Narendra Modi clearly one of the most irritating politicians on the planet, marketing all the time with doing very little work. Clearly, as you can see.
But while Modi may have charmed Bear Grylls, the world and our current president, within India, he's an increasingly controversial figure because his government has pursued a steadily escalating persecution of religious minorities. Persecution so intense that for the last 2 months, Indians across the country have been taking to the streets in anger.
I don't know if it's just me or I think it's a little bit of oversimplification to see the entire country is on the streets. I don't think that is true. I think most people are carrying on with their lives even if they are disturbed by what the government is doing. I think the government should be very careful in implementing NRC, as we will talk about later in the video.
Personal story. He grew up poor and rose from selling tea on railway platforms in Gujarat to running that state and eventually the entire country. His election in 2014 was actually the subject of our very first show, back when he looked the same and I looked 30 years younger.
It seems quite clear that this piece is going to be quite an agreement with John Oliver, but I think Narendra Modi's whole shtick about being a rise from the poor is a little bit of an overestimation. Clearly, we all sympathize, but no, it does not make you somehow a better administrator or even a better prime minister just because you come from a poor background. He needs to do his job, as I said.
Now, Modi ran as a populist, and since becoming Prime Minister has taken one big swing after another, often with the goal of improving the lives of the poor. And he's had some success there. He's delivered new cooking gas connections to 72 million poor families, and he fulfilled a campaign promise to build over 110 million toilets, which is a big deal. That addressed a major public health hazard. So
Another overestimation. The government has been over simplifying and praising itself for the 110 million toilets, but that's not the entire story. It's much more complicated and nuanced. The government should be given some credit, but as we know, the economy is the driver of the whole country, and if the economy is in the dumps, then everything else doesn't matter.
Modi has had some big swing and misses too, like during his first term when he decided to fight corruption and money laundering by abruptly cancelling some of the most commonly used banknotes in India with just 4 hours' notice, which went about as well as you might expect.
Today, as banks opened for the first time since the surprise announcement, there was utter chaos. People lined up for hours to change their money. Some had to be turned away because the banks just ran out of cash.
They are not giving us money.
They keep telling me, come on Monday, come on Monday. I've been standing in the queue for 3 days now and I haven't gotten any money.
Yeah, that's ridiculous and an entirely predictable consequence of announcing.
Clearly, demonetization was one of the biggest missteps of this government. It's made sure that the entire economy has failed to recover since the past 4 years. Clearly, there is a lot of blame to go around. The government needs to take responsibility of the missteps it took and try and apologize to the people and try and course correct and fix this economy.
Policy was a mess. It caused complete chaos and it didn't even make a dent in corruption, and yet incredibly, it didn't make him any less popular. And that is actually one of Modi's greatest strengths. His charisma is such that he somehow evades public anger sticking to him, which is a very dangerous superpower, especially when you consider how extreme one of his defining beliefs is. Because Modi is a Hindu nationalist. And at the core of that is a belief that India is a fundamentally Hindu nation, which is provocative, given that India's founders, Gandhi and Nehru, explicitly disavowed that, with Gandhi saying the state should undoubtedly be secular. And yet, throughout his career, Modi's party, the BJP, has served as the political arm of a hardcore Hindu nationalist paramilitary group. It is extremely worrying to have a prime minister with that association, especially because India has always struggled to strike a balance between its ideals of tolerance and the reality of religious tensions, which have erupted multiple times over the years. And unfortunately, Modi himself was right at the centre of one of those eruptions.
In 2002, violent riots broke out along sectarian lines across Gujarat, killing more than 1,000 people, mostly Muslims. Modi oversaw all of this as head of the state and is blamed for doing nothing to stop the violence. The United States revoked the leader's visa over the incidents in 2005.
Yeah, and that is not good. And what somehow makes it even worse is that over the years, Modi has offered at most tepid apologies for his actions back then, once even walking out of an interview when asked if he regretted that the killings happened, which is just not okay.
This is a very old chapter, not very interested to be very honest, in the 2002 riots, but clearly there was some administration fault with the chief minister then, but the United States at that time was invading in Iraq. It had no stand to ban Narendra Modi as they were committing human rights violations in Iraq. Clearly, there was a lot of hypocrisy.
Modi has employed a similar tactic of strategic quiet as Prime Minister. He doesn't talk much about religious minorities, but those closest to him are comfortable saying a lot. India is home to the second largest population of Muslims on earth, and many members of the BJP have openly targeted them. For instance, when it came time for Modi and his party to appoint a chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, a state that's home to 200 million people, they chose Yogi Adityanath, a man who has said things like this.
हिंदू अलग संस्कृति है, मुस्लिम अलग संस्कृति है, दोनों एक साथ नहीं रह सकती, दो संस्कृतियां कभी एक साथ नहीं रह सकती हैं। अगर एक हिंदू को मारेंगे तो 100 को हम भी मारेंगे।
Holy shit!
Yogi Adityanath is quite a polarizing figure in India as well. He is unqualified for the job of Chief Minister. He has been the MP of Gorakhpur. It is clearly to polarize the Indian electorate, and there is nothing more to it. I think Narendra Modi needs to be criticized for picking him as Chief Minister.
Nehru, for instance, has been edited out of some history textbooks altogether, and what has been added to the curriculum is pretty eye-catching.
In June 2014, the Gujarat government introduced a set of 10 textbooks for primary schools. Most lessons revolve around the idea of Indian supremacy. For example, on page...
Again, quite a rumor. I don't think I have ever seen a textbook while living in India for so long which explicitly calls for such racial bigotry and calls and boasts of Hindu supremacy in such terms. Clearly, this is one textbook that was published with the wrong information. I don't think this is what normal students are taught. There are more important subjects to study, and in fact, our history curriculum is quite famous for being very ancient and old.
This isn't just a cultural battle. Since winning re-election, Modi has moved from quiet support for religious intolerance to concrete action. And in classic Modi fashion, he's done it with a big swing. Because remember those protests that I showed you earlier? They were sparked by a very controversial act, rolling out a National Register of Citizens, or NRC, where everyone would need to provide documents proving they were Indian citizens, something that many people, particularly the poor or illiterate, simply do not have. Now, that alone did not target Muslims, but here is the second part. Modi's government also introduced something called the Citizenship Amendment Bill, or CAB, which granted citizenship to undocumented people if they were from basically any religious minority but Muslims.
And this is the wrong way of contextualizing the act. The Citizenship Act gives citizenship to non-citizens. So that means that they have no right to be citizens, and so they have to get permission from the government. The government gave permission to every faith except Muslims. Clearly it was a move to pander to the majorities of this country, but that does not mean it hurts the citizens of this country who are Muslim. NRC is a different story. Clearly it has administrative problems, but this is not per se an anti-Muslim act. You could say the intent is there, but clearly this cannot be brought down on saying that the Muslims of this country are in grave danger. They are not.
To recap, the NRC kicks everyone who's undocumented off the citizenship rolls, and the CAB lets everyone back on except Muslims.
This is an oversimplification of the act again. This act per se is not anti-Muslim. The intent may be to polarize, but the Muslims of this country are in no grave danger more than the Hindus of being kept out of citizenship due to poverty or illiteracy.
Single argument.
The idea behind the act, it's so vicious that every thinking human being, everyone in this country will be affected, and therefore is standing up.
Hindu, Muslims, everybody are equal. We want that equality.
I'm a Hindu, but I'm an Indian first. So when it comes to the values of secularism given by the India, when it comes to the ideas of foundations of India, then no matter what I should be in that, I should preserve the constitutional values, which is the utmost priority than any other thing.
Exactly.
Again, India is a very populous country. We have a lot of people with a lot of opinions. 3 people saying something does not mean that the entire country believes it. We have to be careful of not oversimplifying and overestimating the amount of people against or pro Mr. Modi.
Home of this enduring symbol of love, frankly deserves a lot more than this temporary symbol of hate.
Again, we don't know the exact number of people who are pro and against this act. Clearly, administratively, NRC is a bad move. We don't have the money. We have a lot of problems with the system where a lot of people can be denied citizenship. We need to be careful, but we don't need to be carried away in thinking that this is anti-Muslim. We need to keep ourselves together. Clearly, John Oliver is trying to portray Mr. Modi as a totally bad person, which maybe he deserves to be, but clearly there needs to be some context, some level of calm while dealing with these issues, and some level of objectivity while dealing with facts.